Well, welcome to the watch list. We are back, and I guess we are really back because Laura Bennett is back. Welcome back, Laura.
Thank you. So nice to be back on the podcast. Missed you, missed chatting movies. It is definitely good to be here because this week is going to be packed.
It's an action-packed one, to say the least. And as we look at film through the lens of faith, we are kind of doing everything that we have to do in regards to Turtles, vigilantes, and the latest female action stars. So we're going to have quite a bit to talk about, but I think the first one we're going to be getting to is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. So if you can believe it, that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have been around since 1984. They have been fighting crime, they've been eating pizza and shouting cowabunga for decades now. Coming from comic books, moving into movies, if you can believe, there's been 7 films, either animated or live action, from the Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael. This one kind of goes back to the beginnings where they are teenagers and we're finding them down in the sewers once again with their father Splinter. And this time they're actually coming up against a new mysterious crime syndicate that's headed up by, get this, the mutant Superfly. So it's a fun one, and I think that it's a fascinating kind of return back to kind of the beginning and origins of the Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, there's something that's always been so fun about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not only because they bring so much nostalgia back for those of us who grew up watching some of the cartoons, but they kind of speak to teenage fun, youthful fun, and that adventure, and particularly the group of them all together, this kind of like team spirit, not to be confused with teen spirit, that comes from like the brotherhood. And it's not exclusively just for the guys, but it's like there's something kind of fun about the sibling identity in that as well, I think.
Oh, truly. I mean, now I got to ask you, have you been a fan? I mean, have you been a fan of them over the years? I mean, throughout the years, have you enjoyed the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at all?
Absolutely. Like they're one of the ones that were so big in my childhood. And then I would say there's kind of been a gap, and it was like they were just there in the pop culture, library of things that we watched and enjoyed. But then when the ones with Megan Fox came back in, the Michael Bay ones, that kind of, reawakened a little bit of the love of the Turtles. And then it's kind of, I would say, sort of simmered down, but they're just those iconic characters that whenever they're back on the screen, whenever they're spoken about, there's going to be those of us that feel like an affinity and an excitement around them.
Yeah, it is. And it's actually kind of fun even talking about it, because we've been able to talk about a new generation that's kind of coming in and being introduced to the Mutant Ninja Turtles and what they offer that's probably a little bit different. And I think that fun is definitely one of those. And that's one of the things coming out of this film that I found that it was finally good just to kind of have another film, a really good option for families overall. I mean, probably not the little ones, but this is definitely one that kind of goes to the teen. As you were saying, both boys and girls, men and women can really enjoy this. Also, what they do is they kind of lean into the nostalgia a bit in this one, where they even kind of go back and they kind of show some of in their heritage and kind of when they became teenagers, what that meant over the years. And so to even have Jackie Chan voicing Splinter was really even kind of a fun nostalgic turn for it too. So I found that really this is a great option for families. But then on top of it, it's a completely different style of kind of animation. When we live with Pixar and these perfect worlds of animation that almost border on looking like the real thing in so many ways, now to go back to kind of what looks like a hand-drawn and also kind of almost kind of absurdist view of the world kind of fit this whole thing. And so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed watching it with my daughter, and we kind of went along and really enjoyed the storyline. So kind of getting reintroduced to him. So overall, I think that it was a pretty fun adventure, to say the least.
I think there's something in the spirit of these movies too that people really enjoy. Like when you think of in this one especially, it's like these guys trying to find their place in the world. If they were allowed to be who they truly are, where would they fit, and what would it look like if they could just be themselves and be accepted? And it only occurs to me the more I think about it as well, that the family that is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that is their dad, it's not a traditional, family model whatsoever.
It's a truly blended family.
Right? And as kids, when we watched this when we were little, you may not have really thought about that, but there was something that made it kind of acceptable to just be a big ramshackle bunch of everybody. Like you find family identity in who you are with, not necessarily like your biological family, which I feel like that's actually something quite special to come from a movie that's aimed, yes, at teenagers, where it's like, you're not necessarily confined to your family of origin in terms of where you find identity and where you can find purpose and how you can find a sense of connection.
Oh, I think you really nailed it. I mean, I think that's one of the big things because it really was pretty special. I think that they do almost better with this film than maybe some of the past films. Was they showed the value of the family and also the love of a father for his sons. I mean, a rat and some turtles. I mean, you couldn't get more blended than that. But then on top of it, to go to the teenager angst of wanting to be accepted within the community. So not only within New York City itself, but also even in the local high school, and how these are teens and they just want to be a part of the teen scene, but they are definitely on the outer when it comes to kind of what that looks like and how it feels. And I think they handle it very well. I think it's written well. On top of it, the April character she's kind of a nerd herself, and so she's kind of on the outer as well. And so it's all of them just wanting to be accepted within this community. And I think that it's something that I think a lot of people can be talking about. I think that's what I love about films like this, is that people afterwards could really be talking with their teens and their kids about what that means and where you find your identity. Do you find it in your friend group, or do you find it in your family, or do you find it with God? There's all of these different ways that you're able to kind of do that. And I think that that's what a film that I love about a film like this.
And we haven't even mentioned that Seth Rogen's behind it. And is it in the opening, somewhere in the trailer for this, I think it is, where it's basically like he's always a teenager, forever a teenager sort of a thing. He describes himself that way, where it's like he's not growing up, so he's going to make these movies that allow him not to have to grow up.
Truly, I think that, and you can kind of see kind of the energy and the spirit of that, definitely of Seth and also the other producers, everybody that's been a part of it. You could tell everybody's just having fun with this.
Yeah.
It is not one where they're trying to go over the top as far as trying to have this deep, meaningful thing, even though there are some meaningful elements, don't get me wrong, but it's still meant to be a comic book. It's meant to be teenagers. It's meant to be turtles, and it is meant to be just fun action. So here's an interesting question for you. I mean, because we kind of hitting about that 3/4 mark of the year. It was one of probably my top family films. I mean, did you have, looking back over some of the films we've had this year, are there any top films that you would say you would recommend for families?
There's hard to pick ones that stand out. Like, I know we spoke a lot about Elemental, the Pixar one, when it came out.
Right.
It, for me, like, it's probably a standout in terms of like strong movies of that nature. But even it, I found quite intense at the time. Like, there was a lot of things that I thought, these are big ideas for like younger audiences to be wrestling with around love and family and the responsibility that we can inherit from our parents and things like that. Like, it was a very big, deep kind of movie, and yet trying to talk to, the younger demographic about it. But I think it has to be mentioned. Elemental would totally be up there for me, I think. Is there any that you would bring?
Yeah, definitely. I felt that. Elemental was definitely one of the top of my list. It's what's been fascinating to me, even with with my grandkids, my kids, and also others. Super Mario Brothers still keeps coming up. I know it wasn't necessarily one of our favorites, but as a film, it has definitely been one that families have really gone back to, and it's become one of the top films of the year. I also really enjoyed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I think kind of goes more into the category, say, that this movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, goes into as far as animated, but kind of more of your teen audience. But I think families and parents could really enjoy that with their kids too. So it's really, I think that all in all, I think that those are some of the top ones. Even though, hey, you know what? I'm going to actually admit it. I enjoyed Little Mermaid. I'm going to say it. Some people may still kind of push back, but I think it was really still a really good film.
Yeah, I would like to change my answer and say that Little Mermaid, I think it is one of the better ones. I don't know if I would say that it's necessarily like for families only or families specifically, but it was a genuinely good, fun movie with a lot to enjoy, a lot of like positivity to bring to the cinema again, and also nothing that, for me at least, it didn't make me like squirm or feel uncomfortable or like have something that you just had to kind of, I don't know. It was a movie that was accessible to everybody, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
I agree with you. I think that's where pretty much all those films are. It is good to see that, and I hope that we actually see more films like that as we're coming up. The next film, I wouldn't necessarily put into this category, even though we did get to see this one together. So I'm really curious, especially what your thoughts are on The Equalizer 3.
I want to to catch us up quickly though on this one because it stars Denzel
Wrong.
Robington. What am I saying? Denzel Washington. It stars Denzel Washington as Robert McCall. If you've seen Equalizer 1 and 2, you know that he's synonymous with this kind of like vigilante justice, but he's the kind of guy that wants to execute justice because he has
Sure.
such a high moral compass. And as someone who was in the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, he was a Marine, he's got that history, but he's wanting to retire from that and finds himself when this movie opens, he seems to be like finishing off one final mission, but then he gets wounded and then ends up in this kind of semi-retirement in Sicily, gets connected with the local villagers there, and then because of the relationship that he has with the locals, he then starts to find some new situations he needs to step into to exact his own kind of justice to protect the locals. And if you didn't know already, this is the first time that Denzel Washington has ever done a franchise like this. So Equalizer
Exactly.
2 was his first ever sequel, making Equalizer 3 his first ever trilogy, and this is now it done as far as we're aware.
At least, and that's probably one of the things that I really enjoyed about it, the fact that there's a finality, not a bad one, but a finality to it. I feel like that this is where it kind of ends. But I'm kind of curious. So, did you enjoy the movie? I mean, have you kind of followed along in this whole trilogy, or is it one that you enjoyed?
It's an interesting question because enjoy to me is such
Yeah,
a
yeah,
difficult word to use around a movie like this because it is so violent. Like if
it
you're a
is.
fan
It is.
of these movies, even to me they kind of group with others like John Wick, with the Taken franchise. They're very different in terms of the characters at the front of them, but it sits within that kind of thing, that kind of the person that's going to save the day, be forever invincible somehow and kill a lot of people in quite graphic ways along the way. So I'm not sitting there going, wow, I really enjoy this violence. Like, shoot another person, please. That's not what I'm thinking. But
No.
I was able to appreciate, weirdly, the craft of how they did it. That might sound
Mm,
bizarre to say, but the way they
right.
did the coordination of the fight sequences, the way they pulled off some of the different exchanges, if you want to call it that, I'm sitting there going, that is horrifically violent. But how did you do that? As in
Right.
terms
Right.
of screencraft, how did you actually make that happen? Because I don't understand the physics of that and also how you visually brought it to life. So I admired the craft, if I can say it that way, but I did
Right.
find the level of violence pretty confronting because the thing in a movie like this is that we're able to almost sit back from the reality of the situation because we know it's a movie, we know it's there for storytelling and a degree of entertainment. But if you at any moment thought, let me just translate this into the real world and imagine if this was actually happening, that is when it becomes completely psychotic and
Right.
unattractive in every way. And there are like real life, gangs and mafia and all of the stuff. So there are contexts where this sort of stuff probably exists to a degree, but in the form of a movie, in the form of entertainment like Equalizer 3, they do kind of set a new bar for how they deliver those kind of scenes.
That's true. I think Antoine Fuqua, who's the director of this film, one of the things he's known for is doing more practical effects than say CGI. Because a lot of times in a lot of these films, they tend to go to the CGI to kind of allow them to kind of do some of the things that they do with, say, the violence and also kind of the grotesque nature of it. But he doesn't. It's all practical effects. And he and Denzel Washington have partnered on quite a few films over the years, going all the way back to like Training Day. Of these franchises, say like you just brought up John Wick, Taken, and this one, what kind of stands out? Because for me, the thing that really kind of helps this through, and actually I think ended up making this almost the best of the trilogy, which is a rare thing. I think usually by the third one we're kind of tired, the characters are kind of tired, but yet Denzel Washington, the guy, even though it's a franchise and it's a known character, the guy has a charisma that is hard to really replicate in any other instance, and that he still manages to kind of carry this film and really kind of make you like him. You want to be around him. He's actually one of those guys you definitely want to be sitting in the cafe next to because oh well, okay, we're at least we're okay. Robert's over there or Denzel's here, kind of thing. So I absolutely think that that's one of the things that really kind of differentiates this from maybe other franchises is the Denzel factor, is that he is just front and center. But but one thing that's different too is that he's vulnerable. From the beginning, it shows that he is just a man. He doesn't have a bulletproof suit that he gets to go through the streets shooting other people. He's actually very vulnerable and almost near death. And so I found that there's a value to that. I think there's a depth of character that kind of went beyond maybe say what you get with John Wick and maybe even the Taken franchise up to a degree. But I mean, but all in all, I mean, I think they all kind of have their own thing if you want to. I'm curious, like which if you have a preference, do you even like any of these films, or is it one that you go to see regularly?
It's not the genre that I normally gravitate toward. I will tell you that much because
Right.
I do find the violence somewhat confronting because for me, I feel like I'm not fully desensitized to somebody
Right.
being completely obliterated and blood spurting across the screen. And should we ever be desensitized to that?
No.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't
No.
know. But so for me, I'm going, oh, like I don't want to necessarily sit there and feel kind of assaulted by that. So I wouldn't normally pick this as my movie to sit and watch. But I do find it interesting the reason why these kind of stories, these kind of characters are appealing. So that I find quite interesting. And when you're watching Denzel on screen especially and his character, even if he doesn't say much, there is something so compelling about him and this idea, I think it's like without wanting to limit this purely to the male experience of watching this movie versus the female experience, but I do know there is a certain appeal to see a guy who seems to know how to navigate his way through the world with a
Right.
really clear personal sense of justice, an ability to be strong in situations where others might not be. You feel like there's a sense of like protection and authority in what he as a character chooses to do and what he does. But then as you mentioned, there's a vulnerability as well. So it's this weird attraction that we have as viewers to that kind of person, someone that is always going to be able to find the way through, protect, somehow know the answer to our biggest questions, and yet prove their own humanity in the middle as well. I find that a really curious thing to consider as to why are we drawn to that? Why do we want that kind of person in our
Right.
corner? Why do we want to somehow feel like we could emulate them? And that's what appeals to me when I watch John Wick. The fact that essentially is about a man who had his dog attacked and had, like lost the most important things to him. It's like there's a sensitivity that makes people bold in the things they feel conviction about. Like the reason we
Sure.
want to fight for certain things is because there's something within us that connects to. Like there's a reason that it gives us. So I think if I was going to rank your Taken, your John Wicks, your Equalizer, maybe John Wick is at the top because I think I just love his character and I love Keanu Reeves. I
Sure.
would then probably put Denzel Washington and then I would go Liam Neeson in Taken. That opinion may change at different points,
Sure.
but one thing I want to bring up about the Equalizer that
Oh.
seems to make this kind of story okay. Because I'm always like, why are we fine with him like shooting people at point blank, but we're not okay
Yeah.
with the mafia boss doing it? I
Right.
think it's because they try to connect someone like Denzel, someone like Robert McCall, to a moral high ground. So even though it's only done subtly in Equalizer 3, he opens his bedside table to get his watch and there happens to be a Bible there. He goes out into, the sort of village courtyard area within this village setting and he's looking up the hill and there happens to be this white cross on the top of the hill and you can see that he's just kind of pondering that. And they never really get down to the nitty gritty of what his faith perspectives might be. But I think they're trying to say, here is a guy who feels like there's a higher authority that he somehow answers to or a higher reason that he's doing the things he's doing.
Right.
And that's meant to make us feel like we should accept a behavior that in so many other settings wouldn't be acceptable.
I think that's brilliant. I think that what you're saying is spot on as far as why also a character like this is so appealing. Because I mean, if you go to see the film, there's this great dialogue where he's asked at the very beginning of the film, "Are you a good man or are you a bad man?" And he says, "Well, I don't know." And that actually kind of makes it out to be, well, actually, a bad man would most likely say he is a good man, so it's a lot of kind of that self-awareness that I really love, and I think that it gives us opportunity to discuss, and I think it does make this character very appealing to a degree, and also there's a certain amount of justification for his form of justice in a way that goes beyond just a beautifully choreographed film like John Wick, and then this one is just a little bit more raw and ready, and gets kind of to the heart of just kind of being a guy who's just trying to make his way in the world in a very unique way. It kind of reminds me of, there's a film called Nobody that came out a few years ago that was just very similar to this, and also just kind of that kind of normal looking guy, but actually he has kind of some skills that are worthwhile kind of considering. So anyway, so it's good. Yeah, I agree with you. The violence is over the top, but I probably would put it on my watch list. I still was surprised because I didn't really like this franchise as much until this film, so I thought this one was the best of the three. All right, so now we're moving to another side of the action sequence. So we move from The Equalizer 3 to a Netflix film that had kind of introducing a new kind of action hero, and that would be The Heart of Stone with Gal Gadot. So with this one, we're definitely a very different character. We're dealing with Gal Gadot, if you know her from Wonder Woman fame. She's on a team that's initially a part of the MI6, which is in England or based out of the UK. And she's Rachel Stone, and she's kind of behind the scenes and kind of does the tech stuff, and is on this really kind of close-knit team that goes around and kind of takes care of different issues with terrorist organizations. But then come to find out that she's actually infiltrated this group, and she's a part of this secret organization called the Charter. I don't think I'm giving away too much as far as what you see in the trailer and all that along that, and that kind of this malevolent group that is able to kind of oversee and kind of handle a lot of the justice even beyond kind of what you see in some of the major players as far as the CIA and the MI6 and others. And with this, within it, they also have this device called the Heart, which here, this right kind of goes right to kind of what we're talking about with artificial intelligence that's kind of caused so much disruption around the world. But the Heart actually connects in so many ways the internet and all of these different components as far as the information, and the Charter gives Stone or Rachel Stone the ability to be able to kind of go and kind of fight crime or evil around the world. But then all of a sudden they realize that maybe there might be a problem within the organization itself and also within her team. So it kind of adds a funny little twist that kind of adds a whole different level to Heart of Stone. So now we've seen both of them. So I'm kind of curious, like, does Gal Gadot, I mean, Wonder Woman, is she the next action hero, do you think?
Yeah, there's almost a little bit of the Mission Impossible in this too, with the way they talk about the artificial intelligence and how it kind of affects these things. I think whenever I watch Gal Gadot in a movie that is not Wonder Woman, like I even think of Red Notice, something like that, it feels like a movie that she's making on her day off. Like whether or not that's good or bad, I absolutely think she's incredible, in the movies that she does. But they just always seem like these guys, they're way more like, let's just chill. Let's just get the job done. Let's tell this great story. We'll get back to Wonder Woman in a minute, because I think she proved with Wonder Woman just how much intensity and charisma and energy and, commitment she could bring to a role. And of course, the sequences in that require so much of the actors that are those like Marvel superheroes. In everything else, she just breezes through it. Like she's doing incredible stunts and doing all of the things. But I'm like, we know you have more in you than like this movie is demanding. So I always feel like it's her getting to take a break. But I do think whether or not she could kind of be the face.
An action film is taking a break, isn't that?
Well, right? Like it's so funny. But I think like whether or not she would really start up like a new franchise and be this kind of new action figure within it, I'm not sure, because I mean, Wonder Woman is always going to be sort of that the hero that she is and the kind of superhero character that she plays, that will be what that is. So if she was to then go and make, 2 or 3 more of these movies, great, but I don't know that it would have the same intensity to it and the same kind of identity for her as a character that Wonder Woman has had. But, she's clearly having fun. She's clearly, enjoying what she's doing and making it a great movie. But I don't know if this would spin off into some kind of major franchise.
Yeah, my challenge is, and this I think this kind of goes to, because I think what they did with Wonder Woman, and it's unfortunate, but she's always going to be compared to that character almost in everything she does. But is that it's a well-written character. There's a depth to it. There's kind of all these different layers that they add in. And also there's a history of Wonder Woman. So people have lived with Wonder Woman for decades, right? Well, this is a new franchise, but I found that with this film and this character, even beyond just Gal Gadot's performance, it wasn't as you're kind of relying on the coolness factor of kind of the AI and the heart and all of these different things that look very almost Minority Report, like how they're kind of operating it and everything, which is very cool. But most even some of the characters like with Mission Impossible, you love Simon Pegg. You love all of these other characters because there's depth, there's a relationship, there's a rapport and all that sort of thing. With this, I just didn't really feel it. I didn't really feel that there was really that much about it. Kind of relying on Gal Gadot's charisma. This kind of goes almost the antithesis of kind of what we were talking about with Denzel Washington, where he just oozes with charisma as he walks onto the screen. Gal Gadot has it, but I don't think they leaned into it enough. And then on top of it, I don't think they really wrote her character to have the depth that we would really kind of buy into. So it was fine. It's fine as an action film, and it really has some interesting premises to it. But in the end, it wasn't like when I'm like going, oh man, this is just a great new character. I want to see more about it. I don't know what if that
But I
kind of
wonder,
the same
for
thing.
me, I think with some of these things, I can't quite put my finger on exactly what it is, but when a movie is made for Netflix and it's purely a streaming movie,
Mm,
there
right.
there tends to be something that feels a little bit thinner about it or more superficial maybe. Like you've got incredible actors in this. You've got a great story, but then it's not there's something in the way they make it where it's not for consumption on a big screen and with this sort of default epic sense that that can bring to something that
Right.
makes it almost feel like something cheaper to consume. And I don't know if that's just a headspace thing around, I can just watch this on the TV, whack it on, enjoy it, it's off.
Sure.
You don't have the event feeling of like going to a movie and it being right there and we're sort of sinking our teeth into it. I wonder if the way we consume these kind of movies is diminishing a little bit of how much credibility or depth we take from them in terms of how engaged we're going to be in it. Like we don't
Right.
it's not it doesn't require as much from us to be involved in it. So I don't know if we feel the same kind of relationship to characters when we only are introduced to them in that kind of format. Like it may not be true of all of them, but I've been noticing that lately where it's a made for Netflix movie just doesn't seem to have the same kind of bite to it as some of the big cinema releases.
Well, I think that that's true. I think that when they're made for the big screen, and when you see them on the big screen, you have an immersive experience. You're there. You've committed to being in this room, right? While when it's on Netflix or streaming, you might be watching on your phone, you might be watching on your tablet, your computer, wherever, or you may not even watch it all at the same time. So you're kind of breaking it up, and so it's even hard to kind of even get into it then. So I think that there's a practical thing to what you're saying as far as an element of what you're kind of bringing out as far as being able to connect with the character. But then on top of it, I they do it every once in a while on Netflix. I mean, and obviously even Apple, I mean, they won the Academy Road Award with Coda, I mean, so there are those that do come through streaming services that are of quality. But unfortunately, I think that sometimes they don't invest as much into the quality of writing, opposed to just going, hey, we got a great cast, we've got a really kind of cool premise, we'll have some great fight scenes, and I'm sure everyone will want to watch it. And I think that that's fine as far as from a consumer standpoint, but as far as from an artistic standpoint, I think it definitely is lacking, and I don't necessarily think they got the most out of all of their characters in this.
Yeah, well, and certainly something being streamed doesn't take away from how powerful the story can be. Like I'm so with you on something like Coda or like the ability of a character to communicate an idea or a message that's valuable, that's absolutely there. Like the platform isn't necessarily going to steal from that, but I do think there's maybe an inherent approach that says, let's just get this out, let's just tell this story, let's just put this out here. Like you're filling a content void, and maybe the
Yeah.
need to fill the content void is taking away from the intentionality behind each element of it maybe. But I actually thought this movie brought up some pretty good ideas. For instance, even with
It did.
Gal Gadot's character, at the beginning, you've got people completely underestimating her and what she's capable of and assuming certain things about her based on certain pieces of information they have, but they don't have the whole story. And I thought that was something that they didn't go into it in any huge way necessarily, but to kind of make us think, who are the people that we're underestimating? What are people capable of that maybe we don't see? And even for ourselves, the ways that we can limit ourselves based on certain responsibilities we are or aren't given. And yet there's so much more to us than people may assume. In the context of this
Yeah.
story, it's for reasons, but that to me stood out as something worth taking away from it, at least.
Well, and also just showing to the even just the simplicity of that it's a broken world, and that even though you want to trust in all of your, say, leaders and all the things that you're a part of, that unfortunately we are human, and so there's a humanity aspect to it that sometimes you have to kind of go through and knowing who you can trust. So I think that there is a discussion to be had that kind of goes beyond this film. That I think it's still, definitely worth. It's entertaining. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it's entertaining, but it maybe in comparison to, say, like a Assault or Mad Max Fury Road or something like that, that had a really great female-led kind of action hero in it, that I actually was kind of hoping, I can't wait till they actually come out with the sequel to either of those. While this one, kind of left me wanting, I guess I want to say, and I didn't necessarily think this was the greatest of films, but it was okay.
No, it was kind of there. It really does make me think of Red Notice. Like you've got
Yeah, totally.
the names and all of the bigness and all of the everything that comes around that. But then you watch the movie and yeah, like it's
Yeah.
sort of, it doesn't. I'm not going to think about this movie now. Like I've watched it. We've talked about it. That's it, done. Like I probably won't
That's
think
it.
about it again.
No, that's right. That's so true. That's so true. Well, hey, before we go, we have a few more minutes left, and this we're going to talk about something that's kind of outside of kind of the films that we usually talk about, but one that will have an impact, especially over the next few months and even into the next few years, I think, and that would be the writers and actors strike that's going on, and it's been going on. I mean, actually, they've gone well past the 100 days. I mean, it has gone longer than the last strike that they had, and it's going to have it start already to you see it in television. You're starting to see it, the impact that it's having across the entertainment industry. Some people might go, oh well, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't impact me too much, but I have a feeling it's going to start to impact people more and more, as we, especially now, we're starting to see films like Dune 2 and others getting pushed into next year, and others, because they not only can't be working on the productions, but they can't even be promoting these productions to a degree, even though there's some rules being kind of pushed to the edge of the limit with definitely some of the independent films and things. Kind of curious what your thoughts are real quick. I mean, the impact that it's having and what you're kind of hearing through the rumor mill, as they say, and when it comes to the writer's strike.
I wanted to see where this was all up to, because there certainly is an impact when actors and those involved can't promote a movie. You suddenly go, all right, well, if we can't talk about this movie, how do we make sure
Right.
that it does well? There's Australian movies that have been pushed back because of this. At the heart of it, one of the big things that the actors, the writers are trying to get is some kind of residual payment, a form of royalty from
Right.
streaming platforms, especially for the ongoing exposure that shows they've worked on are having, right? So if you did, particularly, there's been some of the cast from Breaking Bad or Gilmore Girls, others like that, whereas like these were made many, many years ago before the current context of distribution existed. These actors are still seeing their work, put on these platforms. The big distributors, the big streaming platforms are making profit off the fact that those shows are there, and yet the people that actually made them aren't getting any kind of compensation for that. And then you've got the addition of AI technology, which in so many ways we're not even, I don't think we fully comprehend yet how that can be applied to the creative industries. But when an actor thinks that maybe their image is going to be used in a way that they don't have complete control over, they've essentially got to sign their image and likeness over to these companies. You want to know what that's going to mean and the kind of compensation that you're going to get. And I'm looking for a photo for you, because I was recently in the UK and so we went to Cambridge,
Right.
in England, and we were
I know,
walking.
you sound so educated
I
when you say
sound
this.
so
We were in
educated.
Cambridge.
We're into
We were
Cambridge,
in
and I tell you
Cambridge.
what, it feels like a very elite part of the world. I would tell you that
Sure.
much. I did not feel like I was in any way smart enough to be there. But essentially, this picture, it was speaking about. So we walked past a show that was being filmed. And we didn't realize what was going on. We kind of just found ourselves down this cobblestone pathway. There was a filming notice for people just walking on the sidewalk. Let me tell you what it said. So this was the consent that we as random strangers had to give over by walking through this
Oh my
area.
goodness. Okay.
So it says, by continuing into the designated area, we consent to being recorded in the filming, give each and every consent and waiver required by the company at law to incorporate any resultant recording into the program in which we may appear in vision and or sound. We agree that the company shall acquire the right to use and license others to edit, distribute, and exploit any such recording in all media now known or yet to be invented throughout the world in perpetuity, in each case without liability to you.
Oh my
Whoa,
goodness.
whoa. Like this was
Just by walking in, you've just signed a contract.
fully,
It's like,
the line that got me is that they can distribute or exploit it in any media now or not yet known around the world, forever. I read that as a random stranger, and I thought, if this is what we have to sign over to, imagine if you're in an industry, like this is your industry that you're meant to get paid for. And I don't know if what I saw on this sign is at all in the contracts of, actors and producers and the like, but this is the connection that I'm drawing between the two, where there is such legitimacy for the need for there to be some kind of compensation, especially for the people that work in those industries. If they're having to give over even like 10% of what we as strangers just had to give over walking through this, suburb, I would hope that this writer's strike results in some kind of agreement, because depending who you talk to and what you read, it doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. Like Adam Driver at the Venice Film Festival, he was promoting his film Ferrari. They somehow found a way that he was allowed to at least do that to a degree. And he was asked about the whole strike. And he said that what he's been finding is that some of the smaller independent distributors, the smaller companies, they're able to meet the requests of the different actors, etc. involved. It's the bigger companies and the larger kind of ones that aren't. And you think, shouldn't you guys be able to meet these demands given you've got the backing, the money, the power? So I'm not sure where it's going to go or how long it's going to take, but I think we will start to see the releases available to us thin out a little bit unless they start to make some changes. Because who's going to want to release a movie they can't promote?
Exactly.
And lose that kind of exposure, I guess.
Yeah, because it's already happening. I mean, you could see even the impact of, like, say, some of the films like Blue Beetle and all those that had no one out to promote it. And so it just really, I think it does suffer in that way. And so it does definitely be one of those things where you guys are impacting everybody's income up to a certain degree. And also just even giving us opportunity to be entertained, be it on television or be it in the cinemas. I feel like both sides are softening. Last few interviews I've read that, they're finally starting to come to the table, but I think that there's still quite a bit of hubris that they're going to have to kind of work through, as well as you really can't predict. I mean, it is a different industry. I mean, like you're saying with when Gilmore Girls was made, it's a different time than now. And even how they're making films, they're not making 100 episodes, they're making 10, and so it's just a different model. It's a different way of doing it. So both sides are going to have to come to the table. So it'll be fascinating to see. We'll have to keep an eye on it over the next few months, just to, hopefully it's over in the next few months. So, all right, well, hey, we've come to the end of the watch list. So just real quick. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I definitely put on the watch list for this week. So Equalizer 3, the Equalizer 3, would you put that on your watch list?
Watch list with a warning about violence. So it's a good movie, but it is a very violent one.
I will pretty much put the same asterisk next to it. It said definitely a lot of violence, but if you've enjoyed this franchise, this is probably one of the best ones. So I definitely would say this is the watch list for those who love this sort of film. And then Heart of Stone.
Oh, it's hard to say go and watch it after saying that it's rather forgettable. But if you watch it, you're not wasting your time. You might just go, okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. He's probably not one you're going to go back and watch over and over again. But it's, if you enjoy Gal Gadot, you'll probably enjoy this film, and maybe even it's kind of like Mission Impossible Light.
If you're looking for something reasonable to watch that's not going to be too chaotic or confronting, and just that's a nice one. Easy. Fantastic.
Well, thanks. Hey, Laura, it's so great having you back, and I can't wait to get into the next conversation next time. Make sure you subscribe today. Check out our videos on YouTube. We have the YouTube channel, also all of the reviews on Hope 103.2, and also Real Dialogue. You can definitely find all the different reviews and discussions that we've had here today with all these films and more. And so we look forward to kind of spending some more time with you. Make sure you grab your popcorn, get your seat, and get ready as we look at the film through the lens of faith on the watch list.